Hello. I'm tiptoeing through a flooded park here in Salisbury. You can tell it's Salisbury because over there is the cathedral, if you didn't believe me. Welcome to another Tweedy Outdoors video. I'm doing, sorry about the wind, I'm doing the Ox Drove path today. Feels a bit silly, doesn't it? Oh, it's nice. Let's get walking though. Hardly got anywhere so far. Can't be stopping off at the pub. Very tempting though, that is. Where did we get to? I think the intro there was a bit disrupted by the dramatic start to the walk with the flooded park there in Salisbury. So I'm following a modern route called the Cranborne Droves Way, which should get me most of the way from Salisbury to Shaftesbury. I think it gets to Wyn Green, and then I've got to sort of find my own way from there, the last bit to Shaftesbury. Ordnance Survey maps tells me that it's a 10-hour walk, the route that I've planned, and as it's already just gone midday and sunset is only 4 hours away, I've got at best perhaps 5 hours if I'm lucky of daylight to work with today. So I am going to have to hunker down somewhere overnight in the middle and then complete the rest of the walk tomorrow. Hopefully there's a little bit of a gap in the weather and that will won't be too bad today. Rainy a little bit on and off, more or less dry overnight, to sound like a weatherman, don't I? And then hopefully dry tomorrow morning until about lunchtime, and then it's really going to piss it down. So if I can finish my walk by lunchtime tomorrow, that will be good. This intro is a mess, isn't it? So many rambling segments, but I found out about the Ox Drove from two sources actually, both the Ancient Trackways of Wessex book that I've been reading, Timperley and Brill. That has, it's just a short chapter, but that mentions the route of this, and it doesn't quote a potential age, but if you think Old Sarum has evidence of occupation going back to 3000 BC, and this potentially is a track that linked that to, well, a place that's further to the west, more recently Shaftesbury, then it seems like there is a possibility this is of a similar age to the Ridgeway. We don't know, it could be thousands of years old. The other source that I found was Jack Hargreaves, one of his delightful, charming old programs. Were they called Old Country? I think they possibly started in the 70s, ran into the early 80s, and he has one of his episodes where he goes along what he calls the King's Way, but he is referring to the Ox Drove in a horse and cart, and even wild camps in the middle, and apparently designated camping spot by the side of the track. Not sure if that will still exist today. Miyazaki Cat Bus Tunnel. Only just on the edge of Salisbury here, and it already feels wonderfully rural. That is the first footpath sign I've seen for the Cranborne Droves Way. That's very reassuring. Nice view back down to Salisbury from here. Shame about the pylons, of course, but is that possibly the cathedral over to the right of the screen? It looks a bit too close somehow. Joining here the first drove track of the day. This is labelled on the OS map as the old Shaftesbury Drove track, so we're not yet on the Ox Drove, but hopefully this will lead us to it, or some of the way to it. It's muddier than I would have hoped for. Salisbury racecourse over there. Not actually the easiest track to walk along. There's some pretty significant puddles to negotiate. A lot of, looks like fly tipping as well, sadly. According to the OS map, I'm now following the course of a Roman road just by the side of a field. It's not very obvious, unless I've taken a wrong turn. This is still marked on the OS map here as a Roman road. Really doesn't feel like it now that it's all overgrown like this. I suppose back there it was partly kept clear because it was the edge of a field. You know, these Romans, they're not particularly good at maintaining their roads, are they? Look at that. That needs clearing. I can't even get under. Oh, that was hard. Terrible camera work. Nice bit of silvery, wintry light glinting through the trees here. Joined a proper road now and heading to the, what I understand to be tiny village, possibly even hamlet, Stratford Tony. Alas, no pub. I think this is pretty much it for Stratford Tony. Few farm buildings, couple of houses. Might be a church. Huh. What should I do about this? Right. Oh. That is pretty flooded. I genuinely don't know how to get across here. Can I maybe clamber along that bank at the side? It's going to be a bit thorny, isn't it? And can I jump over there? I don't actually quite think I can make that, especially with a backpack on. Not much of a run up. Oh dear. This is mildly ridiculous. Well, a better YouTuber than I would have crossed once, plonked the camera down, then filmed themselves doing it again. I'm not going to do that. I managed by sort of clambering along through the slightly thorny bushes there. That was not easy. I think I'm going to rename this place Stratford Tony. I assume that's where the ford bit comes from. There is definitely more than one ford here. I think the best thing is that wasn't even the proper ford. There it is, but have to be a braver driver than I would be to drive your car through that. Who would have thought one of the most challenging bits of, well, I shouldn't jinx it, I haven't done most of the walk yet, but quite possibly one of the most challenging bits of the walk was getting through a village. Well, it's a very small village, but I think I'm going to take my chances on this very sodden bit of grass here, because over there is a footpath. Oh, I've managed to cut myself. Oh dear, it's not good. Just hope I don't sink. Oh, it's okay so far. Don't get complacent, Tweedy. Right, good. Oh, there's terra firma, wonderful. Wow, really is very full river there. I'm going to take a quick look at the church. There we go, the historic church at Stratford Tony, which they had the good sense to build a little way up the hill here, so hopefully this doesn't get flooded. I do worry a bit about some of those houses down there. They look quite precarious to me. Is it open? No, I think it's locked. Oh well. So we're going that way. Might actually pause here for a moment and have a quick water break. I ate a couple of slices of bread as well. I didn't think you needed to see that on camera. And that basically was my lunch. I don't think didn't really plan very well there. I arrived at Salisbury just before midday, and I really just wanted to get going and not be hanging around. There's so little daylight this time of year. Sunset is about 4:15, already getting on for 2 o'clock, and easily another 6 miles to cover today, I think. So can't really afford to dawdle, alas. Probably should have had a very early lunch on the train. Anyway, none of that matters. I have left Stratford Tony behind me. Quite glad to see the back of it, pretty though it was. Challenging place to negotiate on foot. Now in this nice tree-lined hold track, still not actually on the Oxdrove yet, still a way off. We will get there. Does that have a sort of bucolic pathos to it? I don't know. Probably can't see as it's in silhouette there. Also looks like something's come to a grisly end there, possibly a crow. Looking at that wing. And that climb a bit hard work. Nice to have the sun on the side of my face, but I'm slightly perturbed by how low in the sky it is already. It's only just after 2 PM. Still a good 2 hours before sunset, but hanging really quite low in the sky. Sorry, terrible camera work time. Point you into the sun as well. There you go. It looks nice. Just wish it was sort of a bit more daylight ahead of us. According to the map, I'm actually back on that Roman road again. I think the path took a bit of a diversion off it and then rejoined it. I assume it was some land where they didn't have access or whatever. Don't know if any of those Roman enthusiasts among you, IWC21, think this looks particularly Roman or not. Nice the way the sun's glinting through these beech trees lining the Roman road here. I think it's going to open up a bit further up here by the looks of things. Some kind of UFO landed here. They obviously misestimated the size required to conquer the Earth. Seem to be walking directly into the sun here. Can't see a thing. I guess I was supposed to cut through down there somewhere, but anyway, back on the path now, although it looks like it just goes diagonally across a field, one of those. Tumulus over there, marked on the OS map. I think that's the first barrow-like thing I've seen on this walk so far. It's a good sign. The landscape is starting to get a bit more interesting. It's been quite agricultural, farmers' field on and off until now. A bit more dips and bumps to look at now. Another section of path that goes diagonally across the field. I can barely see that. I'm only really able to follow it because I can see some footprints from previous walkers. But the actual line of the path is barely visible. At least it's not overgrown, I suppose. At least it's not summer. The red kite or whatever it is overhead is just going to be a dot on the GoPro, isn't it? Complete waste of time trying to film it with this thing. It's a bit better marked out here, the path through a field of some sort of brassicas. Are these? Something cabbagey, judging by the smell. Happy to admit I'm finding this cabbage field is it's wearing a bit thin now. I feel like I've been walking through it for hours. Very large field of whatever this brassica or other vegetable is. Starting to get a little bit repetitive. Crossing over another droving track here. This is called Crouchiston Drove. We're heading this way. Well, I'm heading this way. It's just me. Hopefully not far now until we get to the Ox Drove. Finally through this other unceremonious little gap in the hedge. We're on to the Ox Drove at last. Oh, look at that. Oh, fun. The Ox Drove has greeted us with an impassable puddle. Wonderful. Decided to stay in the field just a tiny bit longer to bypass that puddle back there. Looked a bit ridiculous. Here we are then, Ox Drove track. To the untrained eye, probably looks like any other track, including to my eyes. But this could well be thousands of years old. Oh dear, perhaps that's not an entirely one-off occurrence. I did the Stratflood Tony approach of sort of clambering along the bank at the side and hoping whatever I was holding on to for support wasn't going to break. All very well talking about these ancient tracks being along the tops of the hills so that they could be traversed in winter when it was wet underfoot. The paths and tracks down in the valleys would be washed away or knee deep in mud, but certainly got its fair share of mud here as well, and puddles. By the way, the sky is reflecting in the puddles here. About an hour from sunset now. Looks like it might be a bit of a cloudy one at this point, might not be particularly dramatic, but nice light anyway. Current state of the sun over there. This is marked as hut, lodge and farm on the OS map, and Jack Hargreaves went past on his route along what he called the Kingsway, the Ox Drove. Went past a hut farm. Not sure if there's another one along here, so I'm not sure if this is the original one. The building looks a bit newer here. Jack Hargreaves explained in his programme from, was it 1984, that the huts were originally something like service stations along the ancient track. People would come up from the village and sell supplies to travellers at these huts. That's where the farm takes its name from. Ox Drove crosses a road here. Quite nice views to be had from the road there. going to take a little diversion from the Oxdrove now and head into this bit of woods. On the OS map it looks like there is a long barrow in here, which I'd quite like to take a look at if I can find it. And also I was sort of wondering if this might be a good spot to hunker down for the night. It is still half an hour to go until sunset, so there could well be another hour of useful light, but I don't know, I don't want to get stuck sort of a long way along this track with no better options. So let's take a look. It's a beech wood, so that's sort of a mixed blessing in terms of trying to find camping spots. On the plus side, there's lots of open ground, it's not too dense and overgrown. It's also not particularly stealthy, especially this time of year. You can see quite far and wide, so just sort of hoping this time of day, a weekday in January, there isn't really going to be anyone else around. But anyway, first let's go and see this long barrow if I can find it, and then I'll think about potential camping spots after that. I don't think we're going to see the sunset now in the woods, are we? Just a few minutes away. I can see a little bit of orange glow through the trees over there, but I think that's about it. Looks like this is the long barrow. Of course, like most unexcavated long barrows, it is essentially a lump in the ground. A little bit of a ditch possibly off to this side. May have been the spot from which some of the material was removed from the earth to build this mound. Has at least 3 beech trees, aren't they, growing out of the top. Possibly an older one that has been felled at some point. Now there's just a moss covered stump. So if that is indeed a long barrow, and Historic England seems to think so, then that's quite possibly a 5,000-year-old lump. Something else has met a grisly end there. Is that possibly deer jawbone? Right, I think this spot is going to have to do. It started raining now and it's getting dark. It's a few minutes after sunset. What time is it? 4:30, in fact, a good quarter of an hour after sunset. Of course it gets dark a bit more quickly in the woods, so I'm going to get my tent set up so I've got a dry place to sit while the rain rains. Lights going, isn't it? But tent set up. It's not long gone 5, but I don't really have much else to do, so I might as well get on with cooking tonight's dinner. A little bit concerned that it's just a massive lighthouse beacon having this light on in this not particularly dense bit of woods, but I'm not really sure how else to film this segment. So it's a long time since I've cooked completely in the dark. I've been used to doing daytime. Anyway, enough babbling. Today's dinner, I'm going to make an Italian classic called pasta e fagioli. It's just pasta with beans, essentially. It's sort of a soupy, stewy kind of pasta dish. I thought it would be kind of warming and hearty. It is January. It's not particularly cold right now, but I'm sure I will start to feel it in an hour or so. So for that, I have some borlotti beans. I have some pasta somewhere, hopefully. It's just a plastic box, not particularly much to show there, is there? And a few other bits and pieces, but it's essentially just pasta and beans cooked together. I'm going to do it in the frying pan, which is starting to... Is that rust? I hope that's not rust. I'm going to do it in the frying pan. I don't know how well that's going to fit, but I'll work around it. So the first thing to do is to chop up some onion, one small red onion, got a bit of carrot as well. I think that's sometimes called a sofrito, that sort of start to a Italian soup or sauce where you have chopped onion, carrot, and I think it's supposed to have celery. I don't have any celery. I've got a bit of garlic. First of all, chop up an onion. Not particularly exciting footage. Knife's just too fat sometimes. It doesn't always work particularly well for certain types of vegetables. Little jar of olive oil. Go in there. Goes some chopped onion. I'll chop the rest up as well, but next thing to chop up is the carrot. I peeled it at home just to make life a bit easier. Don't have to bring a peeler then or do an inept job of trying to do it with a knife. Get the idea. Some chopped carrot. And that goes as well. Oh, I've got some garlic as well, haven't I? Chop that up too. Normally perhaps put the beans in first, but I'm a bit worried I might be short of cooking space, so I want to make sure I can get all that pasta in. That can go in now, and obviously that's going to need some water for it to actually cook. I would normally use chopped tinned tomatoes at home, but just didn't really want the extra weight, so instead I'm going to squeeze a load of tomato puree in. I mean, it's ridiculous really because I'm carrying the weight as water anyway, but doesn't sound particularly appetizing. But I think that can of beans will go in there. Yeah, why not? There's a bit of extra liquid in there. Very gloopy liquid. And there's some borlotti beans. That's actually all going to cook. It all looks a bit precarious on there now as well. That looks like a lot of food, doesn't it? But that is my entire dinner there. It just fits. The other thing's one of these tomato stock cubes. Perhaps about, I don't know, half of that or just slightly less. It is quite salty. And then later on, I'm going to grate some parmesan on top of that. While the pasta e fagioli is bubbling away, and hopefully the pasta is actually cooking and it's not all just burning on the bottom. Today's wine, oh, you can't see the annoying, is that visible? I don't know. This is a producer called Taupe Not Merm, got that right? Who I've had a few times before. They're a little bit hit and miss. I think they might be biodynamic or something, and every now and again slightly faulty bottles. I've had one or two duffers from them, but when it's good, it's very good. I think I possibly had this on that Dartmoor Wild Camp I did, getting on for a year ago now. It's a 2018, and this is just their, I think it's just their village level Gevrey Chambertin. I've also had Premier Cru, I think, from them before in the past, which was excellent, apart from the faulty bottles. So let's dig into that. Vague memory of these corks being slightly difficult to get out, but you can hear deers barking off in the distance. I'm just going to say the same things I always say, aren't I? Cherry, a bit floral, blah blah blah. Cherry, a bit floral. That's nice and dainty on the nose. Lovely acidity. I love it at this temperature as well. It's, I suppose, 7 or 8 degrees outside, perhaps a bit warmer than that. Nice bit of fruit on the palate. Nicely rounded. Tannins barely evident. Yes, pretty fruity actually, overall that. Yes, I like it. Fresh, fruity, bit dainty, pretty nice. Bubbling away, probably burning on the bottom. grate a bit of cheese. Probably very poorly framed shot. Have the comically small cheese grater. I think I've brought this out before. And very tail end of a bit of Parmesan. So pathetically slow. Well, it sort of works, you get the idea. I definitely say this is one of those dishes cooked this way you can't get complacent with. I've been stirring this every minute, 30 seconds even, because I think sort of starchy things like beans, they're a lot easier to end up getting just burnt on the bottom. I've been tasting it periodically and I'm not getting any burnt flavour yet, so I'm hoping it's not too bad, but this is obviously going to be a very difficult thing to clean. However, that's a problem for tomorrow when I'm back home. Gloopy as that looks, I think the pasta is actually pretty much cooked. Yeah, it's al dente, but just about edible. I'll give it another minute or so just to soften up a tiny bit more. I think that's probably done enough, so final touch. Garnished with Parmesan. And ready to go, I guess. Probably a terrible camera angle, but here is the finished dish. Very rich, substantial pasta e fagioli. Ought to be warm and hearty, and let's give it a taste. Pasta's nicely cooked now. Carrot's still a bit crunchy, but oh well. That's obvious, but you'd have to like beans to enjoy this. Particularly borlotti beans. It's certainly a substantial pan full of starch. And possibly if I were making this at home, I would use a little bit more water, but I just couldn't really fit much more in the pan here, so it'd be nicer with a tiny hint of black pepper or something on it, but I'm overall pretty happy with that. I put this scarf on. This was a Christmas present from my wife. I quite like it, actually. It goes nicely with a tweed. Sitting here pondering the merit of winter while camping. It is 6:45 or something at the moment. It is really dark. If I turn the camera off, you can't really see very much at all. Occasionally a sort of bit of mist rolls through the woods and it's particularly sort of gloomy and atmospheric. At least a couple of minutes ago I could see some stars. It's hopeless trying to capture those with the GoPro, but I managed to get at least one, not great, but sort of half okay night photo with my phone. Perhaps I'll put that on the screen. It's not amazing, but you get a rough idea of there are some silhouettes of trees, and beyond that some stars are just about visible. I'm reminded what does one do at this time of year for this number of hours? It's to drink some wine and just stare into the gloom, I think. So sorry to those of you who seem to only like wild camping type videos, but I think I'm increasingly sort of just going off the idea, particularly this time of year. Come the spring, I'll probably change my mind once again. But I have actually crawled inside the tent. It's only 8 o'clock. It wasn't so much that it was cold, but it's been kind of raining on and off. Nice and warm and dry inside here. It's just a little bit boring. 12 hours until sunrise. I'm hoping there will be at least some light, hopefully half an hour or perhaps even an hour before then, and I do want to make as early a start as possible. So as I say, it is kind of a challenge wild camping this time of year. I don't mind the cold, but the daylight hours really kind of problematic. So. Can you hear the deer barking? That's loud. Good morning, if that's not an exaggeration. It's not quite 6 AM yet, still a good 2 hours until sunrise, 2 and a bit probably, but I think I feel like I've had enough now of this wild camping lark for one day. That was home for the night. Looks a bit of a mess, doesn't it? But, condensation has been quite bad this time. It's very damp generally around, and there was rain during the night, and the deer barking keeping me awake, and the deer doing some sort of forestry operations a few meters away from my tent a bit earlier, so difficult to get much sleep. I think if I can, I'm going to pack up and try and just do the first bit of the walk in the dark with a head torch. There's a bit of moonlight as well, so should be possible. That's the extent of the condensation / general dampness. There's practically a puddle forming in the back of my and the bottom of the tent here. The Thermarest did a pretty good job. Sorry, there's junk in the way. That did a pretty good job of sort of keeping me up off it, and at least inside the sleeping bag. The sleeping bag also did very well. Still using the As Tukaz Cestrals quilt. That's fairly waterproof, and being synthetic fill isn't affected if it gets a bit damp. So I was pretty warm and mostly dry, just the bits of me sticking out from the sleeping bag. My forehead would occasionally get dripped on. But yeah, really soaking in there. I feel like I ought to take a shot of the tent before I pack it up, as I've hardly really got much footage of the actual tent on this trip. Pretty much all packed up there. Just going to have my very rudimentary breakfast. A couple of slices of Gale's bread. So middle class. I must get one of those toasting attachments for my camp stove at some point. As ever, hashtag leave no trace. Just a bit of dry ground. The only bit in the entire woods, I imagine. So I'm exiting the woods. I chose a spot that was actually relatively close to the entrance, an entrance where there's a path that will lead me back to the ox drove, meaning that this whole excursion into the woods won't have been a huge diversion in the end. If I can find it again in the dark. This tree-lined path looks quite old to me. This leads out of the woods, will eventually reconnect me with the ox drove. I think I've possibly got to do a bit of road as well. Ever so slightly spooky. Short section along the road here, and then I'll be back on the ox drove. Back on the ox drove now, though. I think the road actually made for easier walking, particularly in this lighting. Challenging to deal with an uneven track. With, in the dark, albeit I do have a head torch. Oh no, is that a massive puddle ahead? Yep, massive puddle. With, of course, the whatever the shrubbery is along the edges is thorny as well. Oh dear. I really wish I'd thought ahead and brought the pocket wellies with me on this trip. I'm gonna beat a strategic withdrawal, retreat, and take a detour via the road. There's a path as well. It's a bit longer, but I think that's just a bit silly when I can't really see what I'm doing properly. Okay, change of plan. I noticed the field next to the track there is open access land, so I'm going to walk along the track, but not on the track, if that makes sense, by the side of it, and see if I can find a place to hop back over the fence here. That looks like a good candidate to me. Someone's already done some of the hard work. Back on the ox drove. I hope this isn't another case of walking along for 10 meters and finding another impassable lake. Look at that. Still a while before sunset, but we're starting to get lovely glimpses of pinky orangey sky. It'd be nice to be in a slightly more open spot. I'm a bit enclosed on the track here. I might not get the best view of it. And it's behind me as well, so I've got to keep stopping and turning around. Oh dear. Another one of those. There's a little bit more of a bank on the left now. Very slow progress this morning. Sort of managing by inching along this bank at the left. Boy. Hard work. Not even 8 AM yet, already struggling. And another one, just a few meters on. At least this one's got some sort of a path alternative up on the bank. Crazy. Looking back at the lakes, the lakes of northern Italy. Nice silhouette of those thorny trees and the sunrise. Oh dear, never ends, does it? I wonder if this one's just about tip-toeable, given I can sort of see lumps and bumps. Oh yeah, maybe. Alright, sorry for the terrible camera work. That was a live action sequence. There really is no reprieve. These things feels a little bit less on steady ground. Maybe not. And the side then, I'm worn out. Just want an easy path. Finally a gap in the hedge so I can get a better view of the sunrise, the pre-sunrise, whatever you call this bit. Look, it's got some rustic ephemera to give a pastoral tone to the foreground of that shot. Isn't that satisfying? Here's a plainer version without the rustic ephemera. Which do you prefer? Answers in the comments. This is great footage, isn't it? Progress. Can't walk and talk with all this mud. Progress. Not facing the camera at least. Progress. Try and get to the second word of that sentence. Progress has been incredibly slow this morning. I have been walking over an hour now, I think, since I left camp, and my phone tells me I have accomplished 1.8 miles. Not great, is it? Just this track, it's so you know, there's more of it if I spin you around. Terrible camera work. More of it here. It's such slow going. I think eventually this will join a modern road. The route of the Oxdrove was sort of overlain with a modern road. I'm actually quite looking forward to that, to be honest. Obviously it doesn't have the same kind of ancient mystique as this nearly forgotten droving track, but it will also make for much quicker progress. Deer tracks possibly, or something else, not sure. Mud, mud, glorious mud, nothing quite like it for slowing your progress to Shaftesbury. Mud, mud, more mud. I'm going slightly mud. Do 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 do. It's finally happened. Do 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 do. Mud. I know, said Tweedy. I'll walk along an ancient ridgeway and I'll talk about how it made routes passable even in winter. When the valleys down below were covered in mud and flooded, people would walk high up on the hills and keep their feet dry. So here I am in January. Not really working out like that, is it? Don't quite understand this sign. It says byway to Oxdrove. Surely that is the Oxdrove. Anyway, I'm delighted to report I'm on a tarmac road for a bit now. I'm going to practically skip along here. Look, there are signposts to Shaftesbury and everything, and a bit of the sunrise in the background, and life is good again. Somewhere between 12 and 14 minutes to go until the official moment of sunrise. Now I hope you can see at least a bit of a nice pink glow behind me there. The reason I'm unsure whether it's 12 to 14 minutes, I've been checking on my phone the sunrise time at Salisbury, and it occurred to me, well, actually I'm walking further west to Shaftesbury, and indeed it is 2 minutes later. Sunrise at Salisbury this morning, 10 minutes past 8. Sunrise at Shaftesbury, 12 minutes past 8. Isn't that fascinating? These hedges are still doing a very persistent job of getting in the way of the sunrise. I had to climb up on the little bank there. You can still see the moon over there. I don't know if that's going to come out. Birds flying overhead, flock of sheep grazing. How bucolic. I think this is probably the official moment of sunrise now. It's 8:11. somewhere in between Salisbury and Shaftesbury. I hope closer to Shaftesbury now than Salisbury. I hope I'm over halfway. Certainly feels like I've done a bit of a slog. Just about see the sun poking through the, maybe possibly a slightly better view there. Bit of a 360 view now, this stretch of the road. Some pinkish clouds over there too. How pleased I was with myself for getting up really early and making an early start, and I'd left camp by, was it 6:40 or something, a good hour and a half before sunrise, thinking I might even make it to Shaftesbury for a late breakfast. At the current rate of progress, I think I'm going to be lucky if I get there for lunch. Oh well, I'm actually enjoying it now. I'm not in a rush. I don't have to be back home any particular time today, so I can just take my time as long as the buses from Shaftesbury to Gillingham are still running. Check on the sunrise. Nice. I've been seeing these signs along the way saying voluntary restraint for these byways, the Oxdrove. I've been just ignoring them. It does say it only applies to all motorised vehicles, so it's definitely not to pedestrians, but I think what they're effectively saying is it's going to be tough going this time of year. It's winter, it's going to be partly flooded, it's going to be very muddy, and you know, if you really are determined to go down there, then on your own head be it. So I'm now back on a muddy track again, but I'm hoping this section, given the sort of lay of the land, it's a little bit higher up, doesn't have such sort of deep tall hedges and all of that, so hoping this is going to be a little bit easier going, but that might be just asking for trouble. This is looking pretty good to me so far. It's a lot easier going than that previous section of muddy track. Really wide here. It's like a dual carriageway of ancient tracks. This was the point I was trying to make earlier about this kind of track, it just being easier to negotiate these big puddles, because you can walk on the verge, the embankment, whatever you call this, but it's not, doesn't have dense hedges both sides, so there are options. Still not quite as quick progress as I'd hoped to make. The track is easy to walk on now at least, but feeling a bit of back pain. I think probably, as always when I try wild camping, I didn't sleep particularly well, and my backpack is a bit heavier than I would expect it to be at this point, having eaten the food I brought with me last night and drank at least some of the water, and actually I didn't finish the wine though, so perhaps that's the problem. Just wasn't quite in the mood last night, so I still have half a bottle of that left. Maybe that's what's dragging me down, and of course all that wet kit, soaked up all that water from the woods and carrying that home with me. Nice views off to the side of the track here, across these downs. Weird bit of fly tipping. Is that a car seat? Looks like nature has tried to reclaim it as well. I think over there that's Winklebury Hill. Yeah, it's a big fat finger in the way time. And that has a hill fort on it, possibly Iron Age, Winklebury Camp. I'd thought originally about making a detour to go and see it, but my back's starting to hurt, and still got quite a few miles to go to get even to the end of the Oxdrove, let alone on to Shaftesbury, so I think I might have to skip that, I'm afraid. Quite a long stretch of road now, just finished another section of track back there. Come onto a metalled road. I wonder in Jack Hargreaves' day how much of this was still track, and if any of these sections have been metalled in the intervening time. There's from the Jack Hargreaves probe, you got a sense of more of these kind of open views, and haven't seen a huge amount of this on my walk so far, at least. More of the downs here. Is that Winklebury still there? And some other hills. I don't know. think I'm onto the final straight of the Oxdrove now. We've just left that road, and then there's a chalky track going on from here. The final bit to Wimgreen? Wimgreen? It is Wingreen. Very narrow ridge heading over across to that. Going a bit grey now. There is unfortunately rain forecast for later, which is a shame because Wingreen's probably the spot where we're going to have the best views of the whole walk, and it's getting a bit cloudy, but oh well. Quite an impressive ridge here. It's a very narrow ridge. The track follows here near the start or the end, I suppose. I think I imagined more of it might be like this and not quite so you know, hedgy on either side and not quite so muddy, but at least here some pretty decent views, I think, of the surrounding countryside. It'd be nice if the sky was a bit bluer, but you can't have everything. So this is Wingreen. Still haven't got the name right. Wingreen. Pretty much panoramic views from here. Wingreen, 277 metres high. Wingreen down the hill. This is atop, and that makes it the highest point in the Cranborne Chase area. I don't think I've even mentioned Cranborne Chase yet in this video, but that is the area of Wiltshire heading into Dorset that I have been walking across yesterday and today, and this is also the end of the Cranborne Droves Way, or the start or the end, depending on which way around you do it. So I have walked the whole thing. It starts at Salisbury, it ends here at Wingreen. It's not the end of my walk. I still need to get to Shaftesbury somehow because there's no public transport or anything here, so that's probably still a bit of a trek ahead of me, but I'm going to take a bit of a pause here, drink some water, enjoy sitting on this bench. I can't see I'm sitting on a bench. Sorry if my backpack's spoiling the shot there, but couldn't find much about it on the web in the very cursory search I did just now. It has this clump of beech trees at the top in a ring, and it's slightly reminiscent of Chanctonbury Ring, I suppose, in that regard. I don't know if these are anything particularly ancient. There do look to be some very basic earthworks here, some sort of slight elevation there and a bit of a possible ditch around the outside, but I don't know if that's just naturally occurring. The beech trees are almost certainly deliberately planted here, but whether or not that's an ancient thing or a relatively modern thing, I'm not sure. Oh look, it has a wreath, Christmassy wreath. That's nice. The trig point over there, let's go and tap that. Actually, it's turned a bit cold. I don't know if it's just because I'm in this very high altitude exposed spot. I took my scarf off for a minute and I've had to put it back on again. It's a bit chilly around the neck. Wikipedia tells me that from here on a clear day you can see the Isle of Wight and Bournemouth and places like that, but I don't think today constitutes a particularly clear day. I can see some vague grey blobs in the distance, but anyway, let's go and tap the trig point. I haven't seen a lot of these on today's and yesterday's walk. My first trig point of the outing. I'll go and see what the plinth, whatever this is over here, has to tell us. Probably tell us on a clear day we can see Bournemouth and the Isle of Wight. Oh yes, well, so Bournemouth is somewhere over there, and I'm more interested in his West Shaftesbury. Nice spot, Wingreen, obviously popular with the local dog walkers. I saw 4 or 5, haven't seen that many people for a day, it feels like. Wish I could say a bit more about it, didn't seem to be able to find much my cursory search. So from here I'm actually going to be following a section of the Wessex Ridgeway, which is nice for me because I have sort of walked the whole thing start to finish, but me being me, I made lots of strategic shortcuts along the road, and this section I'm going to be walking today, at least some of it, I think is a bit that I cut off. I cut a corner here, so I didn't come to Wing Green, so it would be nice to fill in one of those gaps there. And then yeah, still a couple of hours walking to do. Apparently I was rather hoping I was I did see actually Shaftesbury on the sign back there. It said 4 miles. That's probably 4 miles in a straight line, and it's a bit hilly here. You probably can't really walk in a straight line. So Ordnance Survey app, the Ordnance Survey app on my phone, I plotted the route and it says there's still 2 hours left. That's confusing. I thought the Cranborne Droves way finished here at Wing Green. Maybe it finishes at the car park. But anyway, there is also a Wessex Ridgeway sign. Wondered if this sign might say anything about the Cranborne Droves way, but it does just look like a National Trust sign about Wing Green itself. Nice, back on the Wessex Ridgeway. Into the woods now on the Wessex Ridgeway, and I think this is a section I actually did walk. It was just back there I followed the road for a bit to cut off a corner and missed out Wing Green 2 years ago, or whenever that was, year and a half, 3, lost track. One thing I remember about the Wessex Ridgeway is that it's got a lot of twists and turns, and it's not always very well signposted, so you've really got to keep your eyes on the map. And the sections where I would just start to get into my stride and think, oh, this is obviously one nice straight route, I'll walk along this for a bit and not think about it too much, I always end up taking a wrong turn and overshooting where I was supposed to turn off, and it's not the easiest of routes to follow. Feels a bit late in the season to be seeing crab apples on the ground. Hundreds of them. Signs seen better days, and look at that. Full of snail shells. That's weird. Ew. I remember this bit from the previous time I was walking along the Wessex Ridgeway. Down here are some watercress beds. There you go, watercress. This is the village of Ludwell. I stopped off at that pub when I was walking the Wessex Ridgeway for lunch. Nice bit of thatch here. I think crossing this road here was the only point on the entire Wessex Ridgeway route, which is 160 miles, that I walked past somebody else who was obviously also doing the whole Wessex Ridgeway. Obviously, you know, it covers lots of local paths, and I met lots of dog walkers and things like that, but the only time I actually saw somebody, you know, with a backpack with a clear intention, I had said a quick hi, and he confirmed that yes, he was indeed planning to walk the whole Wessex Ridgeway. So it's a really under-trodden route, the Wessex Ridgeway. I was doing it in summer that time as well, you know, would have thought it would be peak season, but not always very well signposted. Some bits infuriatingly bendy, but I think, you know, overall I did quite enjoy it. I've left the Wessex Ridgeway now, and for the final bit of my walk I will be following the Hardy Way to Shaftesbury. The OS Maps app tells me about another hour and 10 minutes, something like that, to get to Shaftesbury, and that's where I will end my walk in a bus to Gillingham and the train back to London. Nice bit of thatch over there. Wonder if we're in Dorset yet. That feels more Dorset than Wiltshire. Well, I suppose Avebury has thatched houses, doesn't it? This makes for a nice change, walking along a road. Is that a pine wood up on the bank there? And there's I think a chalk stream down there, a bit too far to see. Very narrow country lane here. I'm coming into the village, I don't think it's even a village, hamlet of Middlecombe. It's pretty. Nice bit of thatch. Very grand looking. It's definitely dragging a bit now. We'd just like to get to Shaftesbury, have a nice long sit down, something to eat, and then head back to London. Feet are starting to hurt now, as well as the back, so The joie de vivre of walking has definitely subsided at this point, I think. I can see the first houses of Shaftesbury just over there, but there's got to be one last mud bath, hasn't there, for old time's sake. Can you say hello and welcome to a Tweedy Outdoors video? It's impressive how they still keep up with those even in the town. Welcome to Shaftesbury. Right, I have made it to Shaftesbury. Originally thought I was going to visit the famous Gold Hill, popularised by those Hovis adverts, but it's raining now. My feet hurt, my back hurt, and I think I just want to get the bus and get back home, have a nice sit down. So we'll have to make do instead for the tourist information photo of Gold Hill, which will look much nicer than it would if I schlepped up there today on foot. I've been walking for 6 hours solid. I'm a bit worn out, but I hope some of that was interesting. Not really very accessible in January, so perhaps better if you were thinking of walking along the Oxdrove. Wait until summer, I would say. Might be a bit more pleasant all round. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.